Welcome to another episode of Your Extraordinary Growth. Today, I'm excited to chat with Mike Kaeding, the CEO of Norhart, a company that designs, builds, and rents apartments. His company is transforming the way apartments are built and managed by incorporating technologies and efficiencies that have revolutionized other industries and led to high-quality, cost-effective projects. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes. All right. So when we talk about innovation in apartment buildings, like what are we talking about here? Just so that the listeners understand what you guys are actually doing.
Yeah. Well, at a really kind of basic level, if you look at a lot of other industries, for example, manufacturing, over the past 60 years, they've seen massive improvements in productivity. In fact, they've seen 760% improvement. If you look at spaces like construction and housing, it's been flat at just 10% of growth. And so, at a really simple level, we're applying the insights from these other industries into the world of construction. But to give you some flavor of that, to answer your question, one thing that we've done is we brought all the work under one roof, under one team. In the world of construction, typically you'd have a different company who's your plumber, a different company who's your electrician, a different company who's your carpenter. And all these people have to work well together, and it just doesn't. Imagine if a construction company were to produce cars. You'd have a different company installing the windshield, a different company installing the door, and a different company installing the wheel. And then the wheel company would call you up, of course, and say, "Hey, I'm so sorry. I got delayed on another project and I can't show up for the next 2 weeks." You'd be just shut down. See, the world of manufacturing looks at us as if we're crazy, but that's how we do things in the world of construction. And so that's how we kind of laid the groundwork. But once we've done that, we can then apply a lot of really interesting, unique techniques that other developers just can't.
So what is now? Was this brainchild yours or how did this all culminate?
Yeah, so my parents originally started the business. It was a small real estate company. Early on, actually, we lost everything. My dad got kidnapped in Peru. It was pretty crazy. But as I was growing up, we'd be building small apartment buildings, and I remember being out there with my little hammer, helping out, helping, quote unquote, out. But I grew up with it, and then I went off to college, and I wanted nothing to do with the family business. And the reason that was is I didn't want people to think it was given to me. To wrestle with my own ego, get past that, ended up joining the family business. But shortly after, my dad unexpectedly passed away. And
Hmm.
so overnight, here I am running this business. And in some ways, it's terrifying, right? I'm just a pipsqueak kid. But in some ways, there was an asset to that. And that is that I didn't know much, right? I
Mm.
could start questioning things. If things didn't seemed odd, I could just ask questions. We could challenge the way things were done. I had no preconceived notion of the way things were supposed to work. And I
Mhm.
think that became sort of the catalyst to start changing how things are done. I wish I
Mhm.
could say I was a genius or something, but it was just accident. Just kind of stumbling into this, just trying to figure out a better way to do things.
Well, they do say that, here's, coaches I always talk about like, well, have you coached a blah, 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 blah. It's like, well, actually, I'm a better coach if I've never coached somebody who's done blah, 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 because I don't know
Mhm.
anything about what they do. So I'm
Yeah.
asking all the dumb questions and challenging the logic that they have lived with. Right. And you talk about like in this, I can't remember who it was, if it was a Tony Robbins or somebody, and they went into a company and they asked, how a certain thing was being done. It was just this and very mundane task, right? And it's just didn't make any sense to them.
Mm.
And he goes, "Why do you do that?" "Well, I don't know. My boss told me I was going to do that." And so they went to the boss, and the boss is like, "So why do you have them do that?" And the boss is like, I don't know. That's just what's in the SOPs. And he says, "Oh, okay." So we went to the SOPs and looked it up, and he talked to the CEO. He says, "CEO, I see this in your SOPs, and why do people do this?" He's like, "It's how we've always done it." And come to find out, it was something that it had to do with some executive assistant to some VP some like 10 years ago that one of the VPs needed to that wanted something from there, and it got handed down to and pushed off and all these other and ended up in SOPs.
Oh my gosh, I see so much of that in our industry and even our company at times. I tell people the reason we do things may have been for a good reason 10, 15, 100 years ago. That
Mhm.
doesn't mean it's a good reason today. So
Mhm.
question everything.
Mhm. I love that. I love that. So now you've obviously got some pushback on this because now you're cutting out, union jobs, plumbers unions and electrical unions, and then now in development, it's not how good you are, it's who you know, right? So how did you overcome those obvious obstacles in your industry when you're trying to revolutionize how it's actually happening?
Yeah. So um, I don't actually have anything against unions. We've had conversations with unions periodically. I think the key that we did, and this is one of the kind of an important turning point in my own life, is to recognize we need great people. And when I say great, I truly mean that. I mean like world class level people. We fly people in from other states to come
Mhm.
work during the week. We have people that one guy actually used to. Steve Jobs announces the iPhone in 2007. Steve Jobs walks off stage, and our employee follows that guy, follows Steve Jobs' presentation. It's that caliber of people
Mhm.
that we work with. Well,
Mhm.
to get those kind of people, you need to pay top of market. Your benefits need to be amazing, and you
Mhm.
have to create an incredible culture. Because just
Mhm.
because you got pay and benefits that are good doesn't mean they're going to stay unless they got a good relationship with the people around them.
Right.
But if you're doing all of that well, it's easy to compete with unions because our pricing, our wages, our benefits, and in some cases, our benefits are actually better than the unions. And so
Mhm.
it
Mhm.
becomes a hard sell for the union then to get involved with us.
Right. No, that makes sense. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I've done the marketing for construction companies and general contractors and specialty contractors, and it's just amazes me how much red tape is involved in bringing a building, which in some aspects for safety, totally get it. But efficiency, you're so right. And so what are the biggest hurdles? I mean, you basically you set yourself up to win by making it a winning team. Get that. That's awesome. Good on you. I wish more entrepreneurs understood that, right? Like, even my early entrepreneurial brain was like, how can I get the cheapest labor that's to work the hardest for me, dot, 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 right? And I always wondered why I had this revolving door. And so I get that. But did you get pushback in the industry?
Not tremendously. I think we got pushback from cities that would say like, "Oh, you're doing plumbing now? Are you a plumbing contractor?"
Mhm.
Right? So that was rough because you're not proven until after you've done a few projects, but no one wants to get involved with you unless you've done a few projects, right? But
The
how to get
catch
that
22,
experience.
right? The good
Exactly.
old boy system.
And so there was a bit of a tightrope. I mean, we followed all the laws, we got the right licenses in place, and then the cities kind of have to accept us. But
Right.
there's a pushback. They're looking at every nook and cranny. They're making sure you don't screw anything up. And if they do, they're there to point their finger at you.
Oh, 100%. But now were you getting hired to build other people's projects, or were you creating your own projects?
So we are building our own projects. And that's
Mm,
actually part of how we're able to lower costs because we get a nice smooth stream of demand because we're
mm,
building the buildings for ourselves, where
sure.
others have to staff up high for high times, staff down for down times. And
Mm.
it just creates more cost.
And so you're the ones then you have a property management company that then supports your construction company, or is it
Yep.
all the same one company?
It's yeah, we've got dozens of companies. It's all under one umbrella.
Uh,
But yeah, a property management company then rents it out to our residents.
and so how long you been doing this?
Uh, s like 12 or 13 years since I joined on full time.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And then so since you had to take it over, how long you been CEO?
Maybe about 10 years.
10 years. Wow, that's amazing. So what was the biggest struggle then in the last 10 years that you faced?
Mm. There's so many. It's kind of funny when you do the kind of growth we're having. There's stuff that just hits you in the face every day. It's a little traumatic sometimes. But well, maybe one example to give you a flavor of it is when COVID hit, we had a new building we were building. It was a $30 million building, and we had a loan that was all done, had all the approvals for it, got everything figured out. And we just the following week, we had closing. And the week before closing, the vice president of the bank, or maybe it was the president of the bank, came out and said, "We're pausing on all loans until after we figure out what happens with COVID."
Ouch.
Yeah.
Ouch.
So we got hundreds of staff members that are all going to be out of a job unless we get a loan in place. It was horrible. We first compiled a list of every single bank in the Midwest that was large enough to do our kind of loans. Only about 60 or so banks, and then we just called the list every single day, right?
Mm.
And it was terrifying because every day that passes, that list went from 60 down to 59, down to 50, down to 40, down to 30. Can there be one that remains? And it's just, and it ended up being like a friend who knew a friend who knew of a credit union, which I hadn't thought about before, who was actually interested in doing loans, like this weird tie. But we would have never found that weird tie if we weren't exploring every possible weird connection to
Oh my
financing that we
gosh.
could get.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. So what would you tell your previous self, like 10 years ago? You're just getting your feet wet with running the business, right? You got so many things running through your brain. But you've lived through a lot of stuff in the last 10 years.
Mm.
What would you say to that person today, knowing what you know today?
I'd say two things. The first is kind of what I've alluded to, is hire the very best because they actually save you money in the long run. Crazy, I know. That's a big mind shift. But maybe something a little bit different is mindset. People don't often realize the power of your own mind. And when you get to doing something new, you're terrified, right? Because like I'm
Mhm.
putting myself out there. What are people going to think of me? Will this fail? Will I be a failure? And
Mhm.
literally everyone goes through that. And I go through it every time I do something new. And I think the big benefit to someone new is to recognize that's a real feeling and to be okay with it and still
Mhm.
step forward despite that feeling.
That's awesome. Well, Mike, I appreciate your time today. I'm hoping that people get inspired by your story and realize that it doesn't matter how big you get, that it's always scary. And for all of our listeners today, thank you for joining us. Remember to subscribe and like the show so you never miss an episode. And until next time, stay extraordinary.